There is a code name, an actual operational code name, the kind you associate with military planning or intelligence operations, attached to the quiet effort to bring Prince Harry and King Charles back together before it is too late. That code name is Project Thor. And the journalist who spent months publicly dismissing every reconciliation signal as manufactured noise, as carefully placed headlines designed to generate hope without substance, changed his mind. Not with a dramatic public reversal, not with a mea culpa column, but in the way a journalist changes position when the evidence stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like coordinated execution between two of the most sophisticated communications operations on Earth. Tom Sykes noticed something specific. The signals coming from Harry's team and the signals coming from the King's office were arriving at the same time, in the same window, pointing in the same direction. Calibrated with a precision that does not happen when two sides are operating independently of each other. When two separate, powerful, politically aware offices release coordinated messages simultaneously in the same news cycle, pointing toward the same conclusion, that is not parallel independent thinking. That is an operation with a plan and a timeline. Project Thor, by Sykes' revised assessment after months of informed skepticism, appears to be real. But here is what I need you to hold in your mind while we walk through this. There are 3 clocks running in this story. 3 separate countdowns, each moving at its own speed, each controlled by different forces, and the entire future of the House of Windsor depends on which one reaches 0 first. The first clock is King Charles's health. Cancer that is not in remission in a 76-year-old man. The second clock is the commercial collapse of the Sussex operation, a machine that requires $3 million every year just to keep running and is watching every revenue stream contract simultaneously. And the third clock is William's patience, because according to Tom Bower's sourced reporting from senior aides inside both the King's office and the Prince of Wales's office, Prince William has already made his decision. He made it on a specific day at a specific moment. And what he decided, if Bower's sources are accurate, includes something so extreme that when I tell you what it is, you will understand why Meghan Markle is reportedly considering legal action and why the title question is not about ceremony, it is about survival. By the end of this, you will know what Project Thor is actually attempting, why it requires a code name at all, what William has reportedly decided, and the exact moment he decided it, why $3 million a year is the number that explains everything, and why the single word that Bower's palace sources use to describe William's posture is the word that should concern the Sussexes more than anything else published about them in 6 years. That word is ruthless. And it was not used by a tabloid columnist, it was used by people who work in the same building as William, who observe his thinking from proximity, and who chose that word deliberately. Let us start with Project Thor. Because it is the least reported and most significant development in the reconciliation conversation, and because understanding it requires understanding exactly how narrow the space is in which it operates. King Charles is managing a cancer diagnosis. The palace has been careful and precise about the language. He is responding to treatment. The schedule has been reduced in intensity. He is in a precautionary phase. But the cancer is not resolved, not in remission. Being managed and managed, as anyone who has lived alongside a cancer diagnosis in their own family knows, is not the same word as cured. It is the word that means we are watching. Charles is 76 years old. He has spent his entire adult life thinking about what the institution requires and what it costs. He watched his family fracture across the last 6 years in ways that were public, documented, commercially orchestrated, and broadcast globally through an Oprah Winfrey interview, a Netflix documentary series, and a memoir titled Spare. And despite absorbing all of that without retaliating, without briefing against his son, without authorizing a single coordinated response through sympathetic journalists, Charles has not given up on the son who orchestrated most of it. That is the personal reality that makes Project Thor necessary. Charles is a father before he is a king. And a father with cancer operates on a different clock, than an institution with centuries. But the personal reality is not the only reality. The institutional reality is that Prince William's position on reconciliation is fixed. And when I say fixed, I do not mean resistant or skeptical or cautious. I mean decided, concluded, settled at a specific moment, and maintained without revision since. If William's position were more flexible, the reconciliation could happen through normal back channels, through intermediaries, through the kind of quiet family negotiation that the monarchy has conducted for centuries without anyone outside the institution needing to know about it. If Harry's operation were less commercially entangled, the conditions for a simple private meeting could be created without elaborate coordination. Project Thor exists precisely because the space between what Charles wants, which is to see his younger son before his own health situation changes irreversibly, and what William will tolerate without publicly objecting, is extraordinarily narrow. So narrow that navigating it requires a code-named operation rather than an open conversation. Here is what Sykes observed that changed his assessment: the timing, not the content of the signals, which could be manufactured by any competent communications team at Buckingham Palace or in Montecito. Not the tone, which could be performed for journalists who want to believe. The timing. Harry's team signals openness to engagement. The King's office signals availability for contact. Both signals arrive in the same window, at the same pace, pointing in the same direction. That degree of synchronization does not occur when two independent operations happen to reach similar conclusions at similar moments. That occurs when two operations have agreed on an approach, agreed on a timeline, and are executing it in parallel according to a shared understanding of when and how messages should be released. Sykes spent months looking at those signals and seeing noise, manufactured hope, headlines without substance behind them. He changed his mind when the pattern became too precise and too persistent to dismiss as coincidence. And Sykes is not a commentator who changes positions lightly. His skepticism was grounded in professional experience covering precisely this kind of orchestrated narrative. When a journalist of that caliber revises his assessment, the revision deserves attention. And notice what is absent from the coordination. William's office. During periods when the other two offices are actively signaling reconciliation, William's office says nothing. And that silence is not neutral. In the context of everything William has communicated publicly and privately about his position, his office's silence during a coordinated signaling operation between his father's office and his brother's team is its own form of communication. He knows what is happening. He can see the signals. His own staff are watching them arrive. And he is choosing not to publicly object, not because he supports what is happening, but because publicly blocking a reconciliation between a father with cancer and his estranged son is a position that generates sympathy for Harry and costs William. That is a calculation William is too strategically disciplined to make. So he stays quiet, he says nothing, he lets the signals accumulate, and he waits. Because William, according to everything Bauer's sources describe, is playing a longer game than either his father or his brother. He is waiting for the moment when the decision becomes his alone to execute. Now let me tell you about that decision. Because Tom Bauer's 2026 book, Betrayal, Power, Deceit, and the Fight for the Future of the Royal Family, contains a chapter about William that is, in Bauer's own framing, one of the most significant pieces of investigative reporting about the future of the British monarchy published in years. And the Sussex response to it tells you as much as the content itself. When the book landed, the Sussex team described it as deranged conspiracy. We have been through this before, but the pattern bears repeating because the pattern is the point. A real denial engages with specifics. A real denial says this date is wrong. This document does not exist. This conversation did not happen. This source is fabricated. Deranged conspiracy engages with nothing specific. It characterizes the author rather than contesting the claims. It is the response you give when you cannot identify a factual error but need the public to disbelieve the work anyway. Bauer is not a gossip columnist recycling blind items. This is the investigative biographer who exposed Robert Maxwell's pension fraud before any mainstream publication was willing to touch the story. Who dismantled Gordon Brown's political mythology with documented sources while Brown was still serving as Prime Minister? Who took on Richard Branson's carefully constructed public image and published findings so specific that Branson's team could not dispute the core claims? Bauer's professional standard, which he has stated publicly and repeatedly, is that he has very good lawyers and he makes sure what he writes is true. His 2022 book on the Sussexes' revenge drew on 80 separate sources. 80 individuals willing to speak to a man with a documented history of accuracy who publishes under the scrutiny of some of the most aggressive libel laws in the Western world. Betrayal appears to draw on sources described as current and former senior aides serving both the King's office and the Prince of Wales's office. People inside the institutional machinery, not outside commentators, not anonymous social media accounts, not retired courtiers trading on fading relevance, working professionals with current access to the decision-making they are describing. Here is what those sources told Bauer about William. And I want to be precise about the distinction between sourced reporting and confirmed intention, because that distinction matters. William is prepared to be ruthless when he becomes king. That word, ruthless, was not applied by a hostile journalist. It was applied by people who work near William, who observe his strategic thinking from professional proximity, and who chose that specific word to describe what they see. The decision to take decisive institutional action was reportedly made at a specific moment. Bauer's sourcing identifies the day. The same day William was preparing to extend a coronation invitation to Harry, a public gesture of fraternal inclusion, and Harry was simultaneously being excluded from the intimate private palace reception held in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth. Two things happening on the same day, pulling in opposite directions. One hand extending, the other withdrawing. And William, holding both positions simultaneously, reportedly concluded from the experience that the middle ground, the managed ambiguity, the partial inclusion is the worst possible institutional outcome. The most specific and most extreme claim in Bauer's reporting, and I want you to hear this clearly, because it is the claim that transforms this from an institutional dispute between adults into something else entirely, is that William's planning includes the potential removal of titles, not just from Harry and Meghan, from Archie and Lilibet. Archie, who is 7 years old, Lilibet, who is 5. Bauer presents this not as an impulsive reaction driven by personal anger, but as a considered strategic decision about institutional clarity. Part of a broader restructuring that William intends to execute with the full constitutional authority of the crown once that authority passes to him. I want to put the coronation moment in sharper focus because it is the hinge on which everything turns. Picture the scene. May of 2023, Westminster Abbey. The coronation of King Charles III, the most significant ceremonial event in the British monarchy since the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953. And William, in the weeks leading up to it, is managing two simultaneous and contradictory gestures toward his brother. On one hand, extending the invitation, come, be present, sit in the Abbey. Be seen as part of the family at the moment the crown passes. That gesture is public, generous, and designed to signal unity. On the other hand, on the same day, Harry is being excluded from the intimate private reception at Buckingham Palace held in memory of their grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, not the public ceremony. The private gathering, the one where the family is actually together, where the formality drops, where the real relationships are visible, one door opened, one door closed, same day, same brother, same decision maker. And according to Bauer's sources, it was the act of holding both positions simultaneously, of extending inclusion with one hand and withdrawing intimacy with the other, that crystallized something in William that had been forming for years. He saw in that single day the institutional cost of ambiguity, the managed middle ground, the attempt to be both welcoming and boundaried at the same time. And he concluded that the ambiguity itself was the problem, not Harry's behavior, not the commercial exploitation, not the Netflix documentary or the memoir, the ambiguity, the institution's inability to commit fully in either direction, to fully include or fully exclude, to fully forgive or fully separate. The middle position, the one Charles instinctively occupies because his nature draws him toward conciliation, was in William's analysis the most damaging position of all. Stop. Let that settle, because the implications run in two directions simultaneously, and both directions matter. The case against removing titles from children is emotionally immediate and publicly powerful. It generates instant and substantial sympathy for Harry and Meghan in quarters where sympathy for them is currently limited. It raises uncomfortable questions about whether the Crown should be exercising its authority against minors who had no part in any adult decision. It becomes the dominant story of William's early reign, the story that defines his first years as king, in a way that is extraordinarily difficult to manage through any communication strategy. Every headline writes itself. The optics are brutal. The case for it, the institutional logic that Bowers' sources describe William as having already worked through, is different, and it is built on numbers rather than emotions. The titles are the commercial engine. Remove them, and you remove the single asset that makes the Sussex operation financially viable at its current scale and its current pricing. Every contract, every partnership, every brand deal, every speaking engagement, every media appearance is priced against the commercial value of the words Prince, Duke, and Duchess. Those words appear in every negotiation. They appear in every press release. They appear in every product description and every media characterization of who these people are and why they command the attention and the fees they command. The titles are not decorative. They are the foundation. And William, according to Bowers' sourcing, understands the commercial architecture completely. He understands what the titles are worth in dollar terms. He understands what removing them would do to the revenue streams that depend on them, and he has made his decision in full awareness of those commercial consequences. That, in Bowers' framing, is precisely what ruthless means in this context. Not impulsive, not emotional, deliberate, calculated, and fully informed about what the decision destroys. Now let me show you the number that makes the title question existential rather than theoretical. Because there is a figure that has circulated widely in reporting about the Sussex operation and has not been publicly contested by anyone in a position to contest it. $3 million. That is the reported annual floor. The minimum required to sustain the lifestyle, the infrastructure, the security arrangements, the properties, the legal teams, the public relations operations, the brand management apparatus, the travel logistics required to exist at the level the Sussexes currently exist. $3 million every year before any discretionary spending, before any expansion, before any new projects, before any growth. Just to keep the existing machine running at its current scale without building anything new. Just maintenance, just survival. And against that $3 million floor, look at what has happened to the revenue side. The Netflix arrangement was restructured from an overall deal reportedly valued at $100 million to a first-look arrangement, then expired without renewal in July of 2025. Spotify did not renew its $20 million contract, and the head of podcast monetization, Bill Simmons, called the Sussexes grifters on the record the day the deal ended. The Archwell Foundation had a documented seven-figure deficit. The lifestyle brand, as ever, saw its United States web traffic decline by nearly half in 4 months. Every revenue stream is contracting. Simultaneously, while the floor stays fixed, the machine costs the same to run whether it is generating income or not. And the primary asset that the entire commercial rationale depends on, the one thing that distinguishes a Sussex brand deal from any other celebrity endorsement, is the title, the institutional connection, the reflected authority of the British Crown. Remove that asset, and the $3 million floor does not change, but the ability to meet it does, dramatically, permanently. A duchess launching a lifestyle brand is one commercial proposition. Meghan Markle of Montecito, California, launching the same brand is a categorically different one. A prince writing a memoir about the royal family generates one level of commercial interest. Harry Mountbatten Windsor, private citizen, writing the same memoir generates a fraction of that interest. The titles are not accessories. They are the revenue stream. And the person who will eventually control whether those titles continue to exist has, according to Bowers' sourced reporting, already decided that they will not. And here is the commercial reality that makes this even more stark. The Sussex operation is not a lean startup. It is a full-scale enterprise with the overhead of a medium-sized corporation, multiple properties, security teams, legal counsel on retainer across multiple jurisdictions, public relations professionals, brand strategists. The Archwell Foundation staff, however reduced it may be after the wave of departures in late 2025, travel logistics for a family that appears at international events. The infrastructure required to maintain relevance in a celebrity marketplace that forgets you within one news cycle if you stop producing content. All of that costs money. All of it sits beneath the $3 million floor, and all of it depends, directly or indirectly, on the commercial premium that the royal titles generate. Strip the title from the speaking fee, and the speaking fee drops. Strip the title from the brand partnership, and the partnership reprices. Strip the title from the Netflix pitch, and the pitch becomes one of 1,000 celebrity pitches rather than something carrying the institutional weight of the British crown. The commercial cascade that follows title removal is not a single event. It is a chain reaction, and every link in that chain leads to the same conclusion: lower valuation, lower fees, lower interest, and the same $3 million floor waiting at the bottom, unchanged, indifferent to the diminished income that is now supposed to reach it. This is why Meghan's reported consideration of legal action over any potential title removal is not primarily about dignity or ceremony or personal identity. It is a financial calculation. The title is the asset. Removing it does not just change how she is addressed at events. It undermines the commercial proposition of every business relationship built on the existence of that title. Legal action would be an attempt to use the courts to protect a commercial asset that the Crown claims the constitutional prerogative to withdraw. Whether such action would succeed is a separate question from whether it would be attempted. The Crown's authority over titles is extensive and constitutionally well established. The legal precedents for challenging a royal prerogative decision of this kind are not favorable to a plaintiff. British courts have historically been reluctant to interfere with royal prerogative in areas where the Crown has exercised uncontested authority for centuries. The letters patent that govern the conferral and withdrawal of royal styles and titles are instruments of the sovereign's personal prerogative, not statutory provisions subject to ordinary judicial review. A legal challenge would need to find constitutional ground that courts have traditionally declined to occupy. But the attempt itself, even an unsuccessful one, would be historically unprecedented in the modern era. A duchess suing the institution she married into over its authority to revoke a title it conferred would generate enormous and sustained coverage, international controversy, and a public debate about the monarchy's authority and accountability that no palace communications team at Buckingham Palace would want to be managing during the fragile early months of a new reign. The legal proceedings alone would consume months, possibly years. Every hearing would produce headlines, every filing would be analyzed. Every argument made in court would be quoted and debated across every platform and publication that covers the monarchy. The threat of legal action functions as its own form of pressure, even if the action would ultimately fail. The cost of winning the case might exceed the cost of the concession that avoids the case entirely. In that calculation, the gap between winning a legal battle and winning the public narrative surrounding that battle is exactly the kind of strategic space the Sussex operation has historically been most effective at occupying. They may not win in court, but they have demonstrated repeatedly an ability to win in the coverage about the court proceedings. And William, for all his institutional confidence, would need to calculate whether the precedent he establishes by acting is worth the years of scrutiny, sympathy for his brother, and media focus that the legal response would generate. Now, let me bring in a historical parallel that Bowers' sources invoke explicitly, because it illuminates the logic behind William's position in a way that raw analysis cannot. The parallel is Prince Andrew. And the lesson William drew from watching his father handle Andrew across years is, in my analysis, the single most important factor shaping what comes next. Researcher Andrew Lowney spent nearly 2 decades studying the lesser-known members of the royal family. His work on Prince Andrew's trajectory, specifically the managed approach the palace adopted after Andrew's most serious public difficulties became impossible to contain, provides the case study that William's circle reportedly returns to consistently when explaining the strategic logic behind William's position. The theory that has currency inside palace circles is that King Charles made a quiet personal commitment to the late Queen, his mother, to look after Andrew in the aftermath of his most damaging controversies. Not to rehabilitate him, not to restore the trust his conduct had destroyed, but to manage him. To keep him within a protective structure that limited the damage he could do while preventing the full, clean rupture that a complete exclusion would have required, explaining to the public. Royal Lodge. The financial arrangements. The continued presence of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie within the working royal orbit. All of these, in this framing, are understood as components of a managed containment strategy, keeping Andrew close enough that his behavior could be observed and influenced, keeping his daughters within the institutional structure to prevent them from becoming independent and unpredictable complicating factors in the broader family narrative. William watched this process unfold across years. He watched managed containment fail to contain. Every time Andrew appeared at a family occasion, even a minor private one, even one that could be reasonably characterized as a purely personal family matter, the story reopened. Every photograph of Andrew at Christmas, at Easter, at any family gathering became the lead image in a news cycle that relitigated his entire public disgrace. Every partial inclusion reactivated a controversy that the institution desperately needed to have gone quiet. The ambiguity perpetuated the damage rather than limiting it. The managed middle ground did not protect the institution. It subjected the institution to a recurring, unpredictable series of reputational injuries that no communication strategy could prevent because the injury was structural, not tactical. You cannot communicate your way out of a problem that is caused by the continued presence of the problem itself. And William's conclusion from that experience, according to Bauer's reporting, is explicit and unambiguous. The half-in model, the managed containment, the maintained ambiguity of partial access and partial exclusion is categorically worse than clean separation. The institution pays a higher ongoing price for the unresolved quality of its most damaging questions than it would pay for a single, clear, final, and difficult decision made once and maintained without revision. His brother is not Andrew. The specific circumstances are entirely different. The personal history is different. The public nature of the departure is different. But the structural logic that William appears to apply to both situations, according to Bauer's sources, is the same. Institutions that leave their most damaging, unresolved questions in a state of managed ambiguity pay for that ambiguity indefinitely, in ways that accumulate and compound rather than fade. And William, having watched the Andrew situation teach that lesson in real time across years of recurring damage, has reportedly concluded that the Sussex question must end differently. Not managed, resolved. Not contained, concluded. Not partially in and partially out. Fully, cleanly, permanently out. And there is one more detail from Bauer's reporting worth noting before I bring the threads together. Bauer cites senior aides inside the institution who reportedly believe Meghan exerted what one source described as an almost hypnotic influence over Harry. The specific phrase documented in the book, sourced from people inside the palace, is that Meghan brainwashed Harry. That is strong language, and Bauer is explicit that this is what sources told him rather than his own characterization. The palace has not challenged the claim. What it tells you about how the people inside the institution interpret the dynamic between Harry and Meghan is not subtle. And it provides context for why the institutional response to the Sussex departure took the shape it took. Not just frustration at what was done, but a specific reading of how it happened. Now, here is where all three clocks converge. And I want to be precise about what is known, what is sourced reporting, and what is inference. Because the distinctions matter, and because treating inference as established fact is precisely the kind of analytical laziness that produces bad analysis about this family. Clock 1. Charles's health. The cancer is not in remission. He is 76. The window that his health creates for Project Thor to produce an actual meeting not just aligns signals of intent, but a physical encounter between father and son, is not open indefinitely. No operation, however carefully coordinated, however precisely timed, can change the fundamental constraint that biology imposes. The window narrows at a pace that nobody in this family controls. Clock 2. The commercial contraction. Every major revenue stream the Sussex operation depends on has either ended, been downgraded, or is contracting. Netflix gone, Spotify gone, the lifestyle brand losing web traffic, the foundation running a deficit. The $3 million annual floor remains fixed while the income to meet it shrinks. The commercial viability of the operation is on a downward trajectory that the title, and only the title, has the power to arrest or reverse. Without the title, the floor does not change, but the ceiling drops to a level that may no longer reach it. Clock 3. William's patience. Bauer's sources describe a decision already made at a specific moment, waiting for the constitutional authority to execute it. William is not deliberating. He is waiting. And what he is waiting for is the crown itself. The moment it passes to him, the full authority to act on what he has already concluded passes with it. And his conclusion, according to the people who observe his thinking from inside the same institution, is that the managed middle ground has failed, that clean separation is the only institutional outcome that stops the accumulation of damage, and that ruthlessness in pursuit of institutional clarity is not cruelty, but responsibility. Which clock reaches 0 first determines the future of this family and the future of the British monarchy's relationship with the Sussex operation. If Charles's clock runs out before Project Thor produces a meeting, the estrangement becomes permanent in a way that cannot be repaired because the person most willing to extend grace is no longer there to extend it. If the commercial clock runs out before the title question is resolved, the Sussex operation faces a financial reckoning that forces decisions from the outside rather than allowing them to be made from within. And if William's clock reaches its moment, if the crown passes and the constitutional authority arrives, the question stops being what William would do and becomes what William is doing. And according to everyone Bauer spoke to, that question was answered on a specific day, at a specific moment, and has not been revisited since. Project Thor is real. The signals are coordinated. The intent is genuine, at least from Charles's side and apparently from Harry's. Though with Harry, the distinction between genuine intent and strategic positioning has been difficult to establish throughout the entire 6-year arc of this story. But the window Project Thor operates in is defined by a cancer diagnosis that is not in remission, an institutional position that has already been decided, and a commercial collapse that makes every month of unresolved ambiguity more costly than the last. The signals accumulate without producing the one thing that signals cannot substitute for, which is a physical meeting in a real room between a father and a son who have not been in the same space for over a year. And the 3 clocks keep running, each at its own speed, each toward its own conclusion, each indifferent to the wishes of the people whose lives they measure. So I will leave you with the question that connects everything. When the crown passes to William, and he has the full constitutional authority to execute the decision Bauer's sources say he has already made, will the public support him? Or will the image of titles being removed from a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old become the defining controversy of his reign before it has properly begun? Because that is the bet William is making. He is betting that by the time the moment arrives, the public's assessment of the Sussex operation will have shifted far enough that the decision, however severe, will be understood as institutional clarity rather than personal vengeance. He is betting that the commercial collapse, the staff departures, the failed contracts, the grifter verdict, the staged attendance at Invictus, The accumulation of 6 years of documented evidence will have built a context in which the decision reads as inevitable rather than cruel. And here is my honest assessment, stated plainly. That bet may be right. The trajectory of public opinion, the trajectory of the commercial numbers, the trajectory of every professional relationship the Sussexes have attempted all point in one direction. But William is betting against the power of 2 children's faces in a photograph. He is betting that institutional logic can withstand the emotional weight of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old losing their titles on the front page of every newspaper on Earth. And that is a bet that no amount of strategic preparation, no amount of sourced reporting, no amount of institutional confidence can guarantee. Because the public does not think institutionally, the public thinks in images. And the image of Archie and Lilibet losing their place in the family their father walked away from is an image that writes its own story, regardless of the institutional logic underneath it. There is also a question that I do not think William has fully reckoned with, and it is this. Archie and Lilibet will grow up. They will eventually be old enough to understand what happened. They will read the books, they will find the interviews, they will see the documents, and they will form their own views about a family dispute that started before they could speak. If their titles are removed while they are 7 and 5 by an uncle they have barely met on the basis of an institutional calculation they had no part in, the question of how those children process that decision, how it shapes their understanding of who they are and what was done to them, is a question that extends decades beyond the current dispute. William is making a decision about children's identities that those children will carry for the rest of their lives. And whether the institutional logic behind that decision survives contact with the emotional reality of 2 young people learning they were stripped of their birthright is something that no aide, no advisor, and no biographer can predict with any certainty. The 3 clocks are running. Project Thor is real but has not yet produced a meeting. The commercial operation is contracting, but the floor remains fixed. And William waits, having made his decision, for the moment when the authority to act arrives. Which clock reaches 0 first is the only question that matters, and nobody in this story gets to set the pace.